Is a performance quiz, the second one, going to be during finals week? I think that's what it says on the current calendar.
Oh, it says that on the current calendar? Okay, in that case, it should be pushed back a week. I guess the situation that I had was, well, I had it on week 10. Did I erroneously interpret this schedule? Because I have it as week 10 as being June 9th and 11th. So I was thinking Wednesday the 10th?
I'm going to check right now.
Okay.
Unless I screwed up my schedule.
It's possible that I got offset, but I feel as though, well, it's good to know now. So, oh, I think I did know what I did wrong. So, notice how I skipped a date between week 8 and week 9. I bet you week 9 is actually the last week of May. Yeah, I bet you I think I'm offset by a week over here. So, you'll probably confirm that. Okay, I don't know how easy, I haven't done much of this semester, this quarter I should say. It's been easy to accomplish this with, in class, but one of the limitations I have is the idea that this is a little more difficult to execute in a virtual environment. But maybe we could analyze beat positions together. It might be good just to double check how we do this. I know we can't really perform this in real time, but we can still analyze stuff. So, with that being said, what is this beat right here? We're in 2/4.
The pickup beat?
It's a pickup beat, but what would it be in terms of the time signature?
The end of 2.
End of 2. All right, so someone just phone in whenever I hover over a beat. Ready? What is this?
1.
So try to be ready. Someone hover in. If multiple people can phone in when I hover over these, okay? Just anticipate when my cursor is going to get here and just say it. Okay? Good. So multiple people. Good. Ready?
1.
I only hear one.
2.
There we go.
1. And 2. And 1. And
2.
1.
2.
And
All right. Moving to moved. 1.
1.
And 2.
1.
Oh, whoa, I made a mistake. 1.
2.
2.
And 2.
We need more participation.
1.
1.
Okay. And then there were none.
And
all right, great.
1.
Isn't this scintillating, guys? All right. 1 and
1.
And okay. I think this pretty much has this rhythmic signature throughout. Nothing too fancy. Let's go on. Oh. Let's go on. Let's go to 6/8. I believe I've explained this to you. I actually can access this just for a refresher, because I don't know if I've explained this to you this semester. There's a difference between 3/4 and 6/8, and I guess the difference would be the idea of it. Oh gosh, I think it's here. Okay, so you might remember this. Sorry, there's so many Zoom windows and need a second screen or something. Okay. So this right here, all these meters right here are simple quadruple meters. Sorry, all these meters right here in the top system are simple meters. All the meters in the bottom system are compound meters, okay? Now, the simple quadruple meter has four beats, as denoted by the numerator of the time signature. Simple triple meter has 3 beats, as denoted by the numerator of the time signature. And simple duple meter has 2 beats, as denoted by the numerator of the time signature. I'm recording this, correct? Okay, cool, thanks. Okay, in the measures right below the simple meters, you're going to find the corresponding compound meter for that particular meter. So what you have below simple quadruple meter is compound quadruple meter. And all a compound meter is when you take a simple meter and you subdivide each of the big beats by 3, okay? As a result, you're going to get 3 times the number of subdivisions. So 4 times 3 is 12, okay? So the result of this is that you're going to get 3 times as many subdivisions, but you're still going to feel 4 of them the strongest. Basically, you're gonna feel the ones. This is a way to think about it. You're gonna feel in a compound meter. You're gonna feel the numerator divided by 3 number of beats per measure as the strongest. So in other words, you're gonna feel 12 divided by 3 equals 4. Mouse is okay. Big beats. Okay. Check out the chat. Okay. Okay. So I saw really quickly. I saw a question about the midterm. Someone was having trouble finding it, but it is in the Google Drive, where it normally is. I think it's under questions. It is up there. I know it must be because people have been submitting it. So I would just look into the documents folder, and we can look at it after class. Okay. So simple quadruple meter versus compound quadruple meter. Both of them have 4 big beats. However, the simple variant is not subdivided any further. The big beats aren't subdivided any further by the time signature, in the time signature itself. But in a compound quadruple meter, the 4 big beats are actually subdivided into 3 smaller subdivisions, and that's actually contained in the time signature itself. So 12/8 really has 4 big beats. Every 4th beat is essentially a big beat. Okay. So it's a simple triple meter. There's 3 big beats, right? To find the compound version of a simple meter, you multiply the numerator by 3, and what you're resulted with is 9/8. And so just like in compound quadruple, every 4th beat is a big beat. And you could still see how there are 3 primary accents in this measure. And the other subdivisions, the other beats in this 9/8 time signature are subordinate to these 3 bigger beats. Okay? So this is simple triple, compound triple. Now this is simple duple, which is 2/4. And again, if you take each of these big beats and you subdivide them into 3, and you encode that into the time signature, you're going to get 6/8. So you had 2/4, 2 times 3 is 6, so now you have 6/8. Okay? Oh, great. Okay. Person found the midterm. Good stuff. Okay, so this is important because this affects how you actually express music. So I think in a previous example, I kind of I think I kept this. I think I kept it over here. Let me see. What I want to show you is just basically how these rhythms manifest in music. So, for instance, yes, this is what I was expecting to find. So if you have a simple like pa pa, I guess I can actually open this in a dedicated PDF app so I can annotate it. Sorry. I have the PDF, but I deleted the file. I wish I still had the file. More robust that way. Okay, so this is like a traditional pa pa accompaniment, like ooh. Sorry. Keyboard's almost on. You can hear this now, right? Right? That sounds like 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1. That's the theme from Up. Now, now this is felt in 3/4 because actually it's very clear that it's 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, right? It'd be weird representing it in 6/8. In other words, if you try to subdivide this into or I guess, yeah, I guess there's another thing that I have to mention. The difference between 3/4 and 6/8. I've mentioned this before, is that 3/4 and 6/8 both have 6/8 notes in the measure. Like if you took this and you reduced it as 8th notes, you could actually get, I guess I'll do this in the system right below it. There's 6/8 notes that could fill in the space of time, right? Just like that, compound duple 6/8 right here. There's clearly 6/8 notes that could fill in this section of time, right? However, the way that the beats are organized is different. So here, the beats are organized in 3 groupings of 2 eighth notes, or 3 groupings of 1 quarter note, right? Here, the way this is represented, oh, this is cool. I'm going to add this in, is as 3 groupings of eighth notes, or 2 groupings of dotted quarter notes. So it's a different feel altogether. So the result is something like this, the up theme, feels as if it's 3 different beats. It doesn't feel as if it's, you know, you could somehow, this is a little ridiculous, but you might think, well, I'm going to represent the up theme as 2 different beats, right? In some ways I beamed it that way, right? You see 3 eighth notes here and 3 eighth notes here. But this is quite obnoxious, the way I've beamed this way. Because this is, it's suggesting that there's some sort of beat that happens here. There's some sort of super stronger beat that happens at this position. But really that's not what happens, right? This feels strong, 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 strong. This is obscuring the feeling of the beat, where the beats actually happen. The way this is beamed obscures the feeling of the music. It feels as though the first beat happens here, the second beat happens here, the third beat happens here. But the way this is making it seem is that the first beat happens here and the second beat happens here. Whereas in reality, this is not how the music's felt at all. So I guess the big thing to remember is that there is a fundamental difference between 3/4 and 6/8. Even though there are 6 eighth note subdivisions that you can have that in both compound duple and simple triple, in both 3/4 and 6/8, the accents of those, the way those those subdivisions are distributed in terms of accent are different. So this has two. This is distributed as two groups of 3/8 notes, and this is distributed as three groups of 2/8 notes. And so I think right here, for instance, a piece like this, I think this is the beginnings of like Pirates of the Caribbean. This is like what you see in right? What you have here is essentially it's 6/8 because you basically feel like, in other words, it would feel weird. Let me actually create a new document here. It would feel weird to take that baseline, which is basically oh, you can't hear this. Doesn't really matter. I'll just play it for you on the piano. It would feel weird. Like there's clearly like a way of grouping this in this manner. Like in other words, it would be weird to do this, to group it like this. Whoops, let me see if I can figure out how to do this. This would kind of obscure the feeling of how this is felt. So where's my accent button? Nope. There we go. This is making it seem as if I represented this in 3/4, right? This is Pirates of the Caribbean. Correct. Right? Now this right here is Pirates of the Caribbean. Incorrect. So when I'm playing the bass line of Pirates of the Caribbean, for example, does it feel like it feels like I'm accenting it here, right? It doesn't feel like I'm doing, right? It doesn't feel like I'm applying an accent here, right? I'm accenting it according to the beginnings of each of these ascending figures, right? So that's a fundamental difference between 3/4 and 6/8. It's like there's a sensible use case for 3/4. There's a sensible use case for 6/8. I think I've explained this every single quarter, but it's worth talking about again, especially since we're in this weird quarantine situation, where it's a little bit harder to for these concepts to transfer over the internet. But any questions about that? No questions? Okay. If you have any questions, please ask. Okay, great. So I guess we'll get back to our rhythm book. So we're in 6/8 right here. And in 6/8, it's a compound. Well, I guess, I'll ask you this. Is 6/8 a compound meter or a simple meter?
Compound.
Compound. Is it what kind of compound?
Duple.
It's compound duple. So if it's a compound meter, to find out what kind of meter it is, you take the numerator, you divide it by 3, and you'll get 2. And 2 is duple, right? Okay, so it's compound duple. So you're expecting to find 2 big beats per measure. So essentially, what you'll find here is the following. Now let me type. Oh, that's cool. I didn't know you could do that. Oh, that's awesome. Okay. Let's see. Okay, what is this beat position right here? The pickup.
2.
2. Ooh, this is gigantic. Okay. It's 2. What about this one? Everyone together now.
and
1,
2,
and
1,
1,
2,
2,
and 1,
1.
2.
Okay. Now, you could represent it this way as well. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. But by representing it this way, you're losing the compoundness of this meter. Like, by encoding it in this way, you're actually clearly seeing where the big beats are. As a result, you'll go 1, 2, and 1, 2. You see how I'm applying emphasis on all of the bigger beats, on all of the duples, basically. 1 and 2. Whereas if I just do this, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, it might not be inherently clear which kind of accent scheme that you have to employ. Because remember, the idea of meter is not just grouping beats into a measure. I guess a big component of meter that we've kind of elaborated on is the accents that you apply to those groupings. So that's why, that's why 6, 8, and 3, 4 are fundamentally different. Sure, you can group those beats in the same way, but the accents are really different in these two different schemes. So that's what is kind of important to remember. And so just kind of remember what accents you're expecting to have depending on which meter you're in. So for instance, in quadruple meters, whether it be simple or compound, you're going to have accents on beat 1 and beat 3, and the stronger accent's going to be on beat 1, and the weaker accent's going to be on beat 3. In triple meters, the accent's going to be on beat 1, and in duple meters, the accent's going to also be on beat 1. That's not to say that you don't subtly accent beat 2. You kind of, in some ways, gently massage. You kind of subtly accent all of the big beats in the measure, but the most preponderant accent, I guess I should say the strongest accent, excuse me, is on beat 1. Okay? Great. Okay, easy. Easy peasy. Okay, let's do some upside down ones. No, just kidding. All right. I miss the days when we could split up in class and half of you could do this while the other half does this. I miss those days. All right. More poetry. Okay, let's do this one. Ready? What's this? Did I hear a 1? I heard not one person say 1. Okay, 1.
E.
E.
And N.
2.
2.
Got the gun on
E.
that one. I guess I jumped the 1 on that one. No. All right.
Wait, shouldn't that be A instead of and?
You're right. I was too focused on this joke I was about to make that I messed up. All right. 2 E and very good. Awesome. Okay. Easy peasy. Okay. Obviously, this is not as easy to do. It's just how can I test you guys on this over the internet? Normally, like half our class would be testing you on this, but it's one thing to theoretically understand something. It's another thing to actually practice. So I would go through, keep in mind, the music majors at San Diego State University, they use this book as a rhythm manual, and it's a good thing to kind of check yourself on, to be able to execute any of these rhythms. And if you're not familiar with this manual, it's under, I think it's under activities. It's under singing for whatever reason. It's called the Eyes and Ears book. I guess I can call it. No, it's not the Eyes and Ears book. What am I saying? It's called the Hall book. Where is it? It's under theory/rhythm. You can also search for things in OneNote. So it's the Hall book. So it's going to be under rhythm. I'd recommend you look through this, since we can't actually do this as well in class, and actually test yourself and be able to execute all these different rhythms. And of course, if you're not sure if you're doing it correctly, since all of you have some sort of fluidity, I guess, by now, I guess, varying degrees of fluidity in music notation software. One way you can check if you're doing this correctly is by literally putting this in your notation software and playing it back, right? And then you can have a reference track to see if you're actually executing these rhythms correctly. Okay, so how about this? What if I just do it? And of course, this is kind of putting some pressure on me to getting it right. I'm going to do this, but I want you to go do it along with me, okay? And if I make a mistake, just pretend I didn't make a mistake, and I'll just keep going, all right? 1, 2, 3, and 1, and 2, and 3, E. 1, and 2, and 3, E, and 1, E. 1, whoops. And 1, 2, and 3. 1, and 2, and 1, 2, and 3. 1, 2, and 3, and 1, 2, and 3, E. 1, and 2, E, and 3, E. 1, E, and 2, and 3, and 1, 2, and 3. 1, and 2, and 3, and 1, and 2, and 3, and 1, and 2, and 3, and 1, and 2, and 3, E, and 1, 2, and 1, 2, and 3, E, 1, and 2, E, 3, E, and 1. Cool. I definitely made some mistakes, but overall, it feels good. I think one thing that makes it easier to do is to actually shadow the subdivisions that you're not saying. Like, for instance, if I'm going 1 E, I'm whispering. I don't know if you can probably hear this because it's going to pick up, this microphone's going to pick up all the sibilances. 1 E, and 2 E, and 3 E, and 1 E, and sound like Michael Jackson. But basically, you say all the little subdivisions inside there, and that'll kind of help you keep on track, because otherwise you're going to you might lose track of it. I certainly do that all the time, because large stretches, swaths of time, you don't exactly know what's going to happen. It's hard to, it's both hard to process the extremely minute scope of time, and also it's hard to process the extremely large scope of time. For instance, you know, what I was watching as I was going to sleep last night was basically like just random videos, like what's the deepest the Earth, someone's drilled into the center of the Earth, and the answer is like 7.8 miles or something. It's like the Russians did it in the 80s, and it's hard to fathom numbers that big, like 7.8 miles. That's really, really big. It's also really difficult to fathom things like picoseconds or nanoseconds or things like that. But what's nice about subdivision, if you have a kind of unifying framework to kind of carry you through this entire exercise, namely this common 16th note subdivision that permeates through every single measure and every single big beat of this, that'll kind of keep you on track through both the big and the small, so you don't feel lost in the infinity of it all. Okay, let's go on to another one. In fact, why don't we do this one? I'll do this, and you do this, and then we'll switch, okay? So on the repeats, I'll do this, and okay, so I'll start out by doing this. On the repeat, I'll do this. You start out by doing this, and on the repeat, you do this, okay? And then there's a good two, okay, so this right here, this symbol right here, this is a bar rest. So this is a little confusing because the reason this is confusing is the following. So if I'm in 2/4, okay, I'll show you an example. So if I'm in 4/4, geez, it's not letting me do it. Okay, oh, there it is. So so this right here, this little construction, ooh, can you see that? Okay. this little construction right here is a half rest. It looks like a hat, right? It kind of has like a little hat feature to it. And this is always worth 2 beats, okay? So in a bar of 4/4, if you see 2 of these, that's basically saying 2 beats of rest, 2 beats of rest, okay? Now, this, if it's hanging, like a stalactite, I think, ceiling, if it's hanging off the ceiling, it's worth 4 beats. However, it's also a bar rest. So this is context dependent. So for instance, in a measure of 2/4, this is actually a 2-beat rest, because this is basically this is basically saying you have a rest for the entire measure. Okay, so that's confusing. So if you see the symbol in a bar of 4/4, it means it's 4-beat rest. If you see the symbol in the context of a 2/4 time signature, that means it's a 2-beat rest. Okay, excuse me. So in this particular context, we're in 2/4, which means we only have 2 beats of rest. Okay, a little bit confusing. Okay, let's do this, guys. All right, I'll give you 2 bars for nothing. 1, 2, 1, 2. 1 and 2 E and 1 and 2 and 1, 2. 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 E and 1, 2. 1 E 2 and 1 and 2 E 1, 2. 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and 1, 2. 1 E and 2 and 1 and 2 E and 1, 2. 1 E 2 and 1 and 2 E. Yeah. Great job. I actually could not hear any of you guys, but I assume you were following along and doing that correctly. Great. Any questions about this? Okay. I mean, we have to do this. We have to do some rhythm. I think your TAs are doing this in section 2, but, you know, we have an extra day here, guys. This is one of my favorite things to do, actual hands-on activities. This is real music. Okay. Shakespeare. Okay. So this, I don't like this one. I like it, but it's a little, it's, some of the accents, some of the syllables are in the wrong. Accents are a little strange. Or maybe the accents aren't strange as much as the words are a little strange, so I don't intuitively know where these accents go. For instance, il a mi, I don't know what that is. Keep scrolling, keep scrolling. Check out chat. Is there an extra day you can go over something auxiliary like add chord inversions? Add chord inversions. Sure. Add chord inversion. Yeah. Or like in general, like jazz chord inversions. Okay. I was going to talk about that a little bit, and maybe I can kind of explain that a little bit. I don't have. I'll remember last time one of the students, I think Maxwell, was here, and there was something kind of significant about this, and I guess I can kind of talk to you about it in real time. Explain. So we've been obsessed with this idea of a snowman, right? Idea of a snowman is it's a closed voicing root position version of the chord. However, that's the way we've been kind of thinking about it. So for instance, you see this, you think of this as basically being a C major 7 chord. Okay? Right. You know what? Let me actually restart Sibelius. And we're going to talk about rootless voicings first, because this is going to be something that I want you to be aware of. Put this in one series. This is good. I'll just keep it in this folder and I'll organize it later. Famous last words when I actually don't organize this later, but we'll see. Let me quit this. Quit this. Pirates of the Caribbean, sure. Don't mind if I do. All right, so Sibelius is going to open, and we've been always talking about these closed-voiced root position version of the chords in the context of the fact that the bottom note of the chord is actually the root of the chord. Now, that isn't always the case. No, excuse me for a sec. I'm just going to having extreme hunger, so pardon me. Okay. Sorry, it probably doesn't sound great over the microphone. Excuse me. Okay. The idea is we're accustomed to this idea of this, right? You have the C major 7 chord, which I guess is represented by that. Oh, that, right? And the assumption is the root of this chord is the bottom of the snowman, okay? This is like a huge part of this. It's a huge assumption we're making. However, couldn't you imagine a scenario where this actually fit into a larger chord of which we did not actually know the root? You can imagine that, right? So what if I had this, but I actually had the bass note be A? Right? Had something like that. Over here, if I just have this, and you're assuming that this is the root, you feel as though you're in C major, right? C major 7. But the idea is, what if I just put an A right here, right? All of a sudden, guess what? Now I have to reassess this entire chord, right? I have to reassess this entire chord, and it turns out that the closed voicing, the snowman version of this chord, is this chord right here, right? Okay. Now here's the thing: when you're actually in the real world out there, oftentimes now this is something I want you to understand. You might be in a situation where this is actually an acceptable way to voice an A minor 9 chord, even though when you just play these notes, you're actually leaving out the root, right? In this particular situation, you're leaving out the root. And you might say, well, that's blasphemous. Like, how can I leave out the root? Like, it's so important, right? It's like, it really like explains to you the chord that you're using. Like, it just doesn't seem to make any sense. Well, this is a perfect example of where you would use it. Let's say like you're in a jazz ensemble. The bass player will be playing the root. So for instance, like, maybe I can do this here. I'll just create this in Ableton really quickly. I'll demonstrate what it means basically. So let's say I have a bass player. Let's say I bass. That's the way this works. I think this will work. Or actually, I have a quicker way of demonstrating this. Okay, here's a quicker way of demonstrating this. So in this particular situation, can you hear this audio? Let's see.
Yeah.
Okay. So what we have here, I'm going to take out the piano part, and I'm going to turn on the bass. Depending on which instrument I'm practicing, I turn off different instruments. So turn off the piano and leave the bass. Incidentally, in case you're wondering how this works, the the way this works is most of the time, the big beat, the first beat of each measure, is going to be the actual root of the chord. The bass player will most likely play the root of the chord on the first beat. And then he'll use a combination of neighboring tones and passing tones to fill in the rest. That's the biggest approximation I can give you on how to create a walking bass line. There's more to be said about that. It's a study in itself. It's very fun. It's very addictive to play jazz bass lines. And bass lines in general. You can see, it's not limited to jazz. You know, Bach and Chopin will do the same things. Generally, you'll have the chord tones on the first beat. This harkens back to counterpoint in the 16th century and 18th century. So essentially, that's something I wanted to kind of tell you. Now, knowing that they're kind of, the bass player is kind of taking care of the function of the chord tones, the root of the chord, basically, you can actually not play the root because the bass player is playing the root. So, for instance, what you can do instead is you can basically do these rootless voicings I'm kind of telling you about. Like, you know how I said basically, so I'm gonna put the root in a very, very faint color that's kind of suggesting that it's not really played, right? It's like the root is implied but omitted. The rootless voicing, right? So right here, oh gosh, I need to figure out a way to make this not red, but it's not red when I export it, but it's still bothersome. So that frees you up, essentially. This is one of the ways I guess you can think about inverting jazz chords, and by the standpoint that you just like leave a note out by omission. It's sort of it's a way you can invert it. So the result is you might say, well, why wouldn't I want to do that? Why would I want to do that? Like, why don't I just play root position chords for all of these? It doesn't sound as rich. I'll show you what I mean. Ooh, let me adjust my volume so it's more balanced, because that probably doesn't sound balanced at all. Okay. I'm basically playing root position chords for all of these, okay? And you know how to play all of these. Now, there's a little bit of redundancy because I'm playing the root, the bass player is playing the root, and the bass player is getting angry. He's saying, "Come on, man, you're stepping on my toes. I'm trying to represent these bass notes, and you're not letting me do my thing. You know, like I'm in charge of the low note territory. You control the mid range, okay? I'll control the lows. You control the mid-range, and like maybe a saxophone will control the highs. So now listen to that. Listen to this in difference. Right? Sounds much more full, right? It's like you're not stepping on the other person's toes. So this is a really significant thing that it's this idea that a snowman, it's kind of a different thing because you're not in a snowman, you're always assuming that the root is in the chord. You're kind of designing it so that the root is the bass note, right? A snowman essentially is root is bass note. But in this particular case, we're dealing with rootless voicings, where you're basically like leaving out the root on purpose so that the bass player can actually play this stuff. Now, this is really good. This is a really good compositional tool, too, because when you're composing, you can separate the functions of what you're doing. So the bass player, you like write a bass line. And then over here you go like, you play chords, and you either leave the root out or you don't leave the root out. But it's sort of giving you an insight, I think, into the separate functions of the bass or the separate functions of the bass and root collectively, and the kind of chord itself, exempting those notes, and combined with like the mid-range frequencies that the piano or other chordal instruments kind of will be expected to play on. Let's see, there's a question in the chat. Songs off that album Kid. Love to do that. Oh, that's a great album. In fact, it's so funny you brought that up. I've been doing some spring cleaning in my house. I found 2 copies of that CD in my house because I've been throwing away all my jewel cases and just keeping the CDs. So it's such a good album. That was like the first Radiohead album I listened to. Like, well, in that particular song, actually, that's root positions. I'm trying to think of another example. There's so many good songs on there. Optimistic. Yeah, I guess the right hand for sure. They're all slash chords. So this is another idea, right? So the idea is that a slash chord in some ways is similar in idea to this, right? So I think I talked about this a little bit. Slash chords. Some ways they are. I'll just tell you what a slash chord is again. I think I actually have this over here. I hope. Right. Yeah, so if the denominator note is part of the numerator chord, it's an inversion of the numerator. Okay. How does this relate? Okay, I think the way it kind of relates is that if you have this, it's a stretch to say it relates this way, but you can kind of say it's like a C major 7 over A in some ways. In the sense that and then the piano player could kind of play the C major 7 and the bass player can play the A. I don't know. This is not an illegal voicing as Sibelius accepts it. Nothing's really illegal, but it's a canonical. It's under the jurisdiction of a canonical way of representing this. So Sibelius didn't complain. Anyway, so this is a really fast and this is a really kind of quick primer on rootless voicings. But you can get more complicated in this. So knowing that this exists is one thing, okay? But you could also invert all of these other notes however you like. So right now I still have an A minor ninth chord. This is like kind of, this is sort of snowman-ish, right? Right? It's just like I'm just distributing it so that I'm just leaving out the root, but it's still kind of snowman-esque, right? From the standpoint that it's kind of a rootless snowman in some ways. It looks snowman-like, but I can actually rearrange this in multiple ways now. I'm like, well, whoops, I could do that, right? There's really infinite possibilities. So now what I have is like, I guess, how can I say this explicitly? A rootless open voicing version of the chord. Right? I mean, a rav. Okay, you have that. So really, it's like up to your imagination. Now, this is interesting. I know this is, hey, since we have extra class time, we can talk about this stuff. But and maybe I will put this on some assignments going forwards, because secondary diminished chords are fun, but well, they're conceptually interesting, but they're a little, I don't know how practical they are relative to maybe inverting chords. So maybe we'll talk more about this. I'll dissent from the recommended UCSD 1 series syllabus a little bit, or course outline that I was provided. So there's this interesting idea in jazz. Let's see. Let's say I have this chord. Okay. So let's take a look at this chord really quickly. Let me see. Da, 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 da. Okay. So I have this chord right here. Now, so essentially what I did to get this chord is this voicing right here, I rearranged as a snowman. And what I got was an incomplete snowman, right? Now, an incomplete snowman can be implicitly treated as a full, complete snowman. You just kind of have to fill in. It's just some of the snow is melted, but you can just you can fill in the gaps. It's perceptually, for some reason, it works that way, right? So, for instance, if I were to fill in the gaps for the snowman, I would basically get this filled in, unmelted snowman, right? So I start out with this voicing, this particular open voicing jazz chord that I'm trying to analyze. And I had to rearrange it as a snowman. You can't really avoid that. Even with rootless, non-rootless, all that stuff, I think you have to still make it a snowman. The root may or may not be there. It might be a rootless snowman, but you have to do that regardless. So let's take a look at this. What do we have here? We have a C major with, well, I'm going to use this notation. In fact, I'm going to do this. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say this is a C major. Well, what do we have here? What is the underlying seventh chord quality? We left out the fifth, but what is the seventh chord here? What kind of what quality is this?
Are we treating this as a C?
What was that, Shane?
Are we treating this as a C or an A minor?
We're treating this as a C. We're treating the C as the root of this chord.
Is it major 7?
The C major 7. So C major 7 with a 9 and a 13. Okay. Okay, great. So that's basically what this chord is. Now, interestingly, this particular voicing, what's unique about this? We're obsessed we've been obsessed so far with this idea of thirds. What's unique about this one?
They're all fourths?
It's all fourths, right? Yeah, it's all fourths. Now, this is a huge shift that jazz had, I think, I want to say the 60s, but maybe even earlier than that, where people started rearranging triadic structures, kind of third snowman structures, as fourth structures. So this, you might think, is like some weird alien-looking snowman or something. This is cool, right? This is like some strange structure. Now, this is interesting. This just has a very jazz sound to it. So one big thing about this is that they often didn't treat this as oftentimes they treated the structure just like they treat almost all structures in jazz as being flexible in whether it's a rootless structure or whether it has the root in the structure. So for instance, I can take this structure, well, extending this idea just from the previous example. If I have this structure, let's say we're in this particular land, right? Check this out. This is this A minor. This is this C major 7 chord, right? With this is a rootless voicing, and this is that particular structure occurring with multiple bass notes, right? This is this structure occurring with the root being C. This is the same structure with the root being B. This is the same structure with the root being A. This is the same structure with the root being G, right? Now, this is an important feature, attribute, okay? Oftentimes, improvisers and musicians will think about structures more than they think about whether something is they'll think about the structure instead of the snowman, I guess. So think of the structure outside of the concept of a snowman. This is like a big thing, okay? Sometimes the structure can like be a snowman. Sometimes the structure may not be a snowman. Right? The idea is this structure, I'm used to playing this structure over a variety of bass notes. And I kind of think about the structure as its own thing, right? So the result is, let's look at the simpler example really quickly. I know it's a lot of information, but hopefully you can follow along to some extent. Or my Sibelius is crashing. While it's crashing, I'll, oh, well, it wants to save. Ugh, sorry, my Sibelius is still crashing. There's something in the chat, though. Take a look. Songs off the album. Oh, Today I Woke Up Sucking on a Lemon, if anyone gets it. Ah, is that from the album? I'm trying to remember. Is that from Everything in Its Right Place? I'm not sure. Okay. I'm so bad at hearing lyrics, but I got that one. I feel proud. All right. Great. Oh, but instead for him, it was Yesterday. I always thought, okay, interesting. Okay. It doesn't like me right now. It's too bad. You know what? I think this is something worth talking about. It's a whole can of worms. Why doesn't it save? I don't like this because it's going to save, and now I'm going to lose. It's not going to be organized. I'm going to forget that I made this. But anyway. Okay. Something's bugging out on my computer. So consider this structure, right? This particular voicing. A structure is really just, another word for a structure, I guess, is a voicing. This is a 4-note voicing that has like stacked thirds, right? That's like the structure of this, right? That's non-respective to any kind of the snowman relation of it. Like, what is the root of the chord? The structure sometimes can be described in that term, but in the context of right now, just think about this structure as agnostic to that. Just think about it as 3/3 stacked on top of each other, okay? Now, depending on which bass note you give, we can analyze this chord differently. So let's actually, I got to quit Sibelius, guys. Let me restart this. So what I want to get at is that the structures in the top system, the top staff of the piano, are all the same, but the bass notes in the bottom system are all different. And that will actually lead to a different analysis a different snowman analysis for each of those particular chords. Okay? So let's actually analyze each of those chords in terms of jazz voicing, in terms of snowman, in terms of what the snowman is. Wow. Oh my gosh, what's going on? I don't like this, guys. Okay, I like it. Rootless Voicings. So let's take a look at this, all right? All that stuff got deleted, that's okay. Okay. So what is this chord? Well, this is, if this rootless voicing, if we're kind of assuming that the C is the root of this rootless voicing, which is here, I guess I'll write that here. These are the assumed roots. And I'll put them all in blue. So these roots may not necessarily exist in the piano part, but they will probably manifest somewhere else in the music, like the bass part, okay? So these are assumed roots. So if we're analyzing this voicing in the context of this assumed root at this moment, what do we get? We get a C major 7. Okay? Now, if we're analyzing this with this B, we're still going to get a C major 7, right? Well, I guess I should say assumed bass notes. Right? No, actually, no. Assumed roots. So we're not actually going to. Let's just assume that this is actually, the B is the root of this chord. And that's like what we want the root to be. But instead for him, yeah, would you write this as C major 7 or a B as a slash chord? This is a great occasion. I was just literally, you took the thought right out of my head. I was just thinking that. This would be a great occasion to write C major 7 over B. Okay? Then this one right here, I guess you could write C major 7 over A, but you could actually, you could just write A minor 9, right? Right? Because if you make this into a snowman, right, that's going to be an A minor 9. Okay? Here, what do we have? We have basically, I guess the most sensible way to describe this would be C major 7, using a slash chord, C major 7 over G. There's some sort of weird, I haven't quite put my finger on this, there's some sort of weird association between the note, the bass notes and the root. So I'm going to put roots and bass notes. It's not exactly clear to me. In some ways, it can feel like an inversion. It can feel like a root. Okay? Now, this one I'm actually going to analyze not as a slash chord. I could if I wanted to, but instead, I'm going to call this an F. It's a major 7. Okay, so in order to So what I have here is an F major 7. How do I know that? Well, let's just put this into a closed voicing snowman representation. What do I get? So F, C, so what I get is this. Okay? So in some ways it's an incomplete snowman, right? So you can assume that A was there and it was major, I guess. I'm guessing it's major because, well, I guess it could be this too. You could represent since it's not explicitly given, you could represent this as in two different ways. So one way of representing this is, well, assuming that this note is an A natural, we can make the case that this is an F major 7, right? With a 9 and 11, okay? Okay. The other assumption we can make is that this could be an F minor 7, F minor major 7 with a 9 and 11. Right? Because both of those are possible, given that the A is excluded, right? An incomplete snowman, you might want to just fill it in, but you have multiple choices in terms of how you fill it in, right? Okay. Is the 9 flat in the F major 11 chord? I think the 11 is sharp. I think the 9 is not flat, but yeah. But yes, the 11 was sharp. Another reason, I guess, like, oh, here as well. Yeah, I mean, I would think that this voicing is more characteristically associated with F major 7 because you see this is 9 and sharp 11. More often, I think, with this kind of voicing. You just have to take my word for it. Anyway, just analyzing these, just doing some analysis here, folks. So what we have here is, you know, to simplify our lives a little bit, we can just do C major 7 over E, right? So what I'm trying to bring your attention to is these structures, which may or may not look like snowmen, might not have the root in the chord or the bass note of the chord, right? It might omit those, okay? So the result is you can actually take the structure and the main point I'm trying to make here is depending on the chord you have, you would place this structure in a different, you would use this structure differently depending on a specific chord that you were encountering. So for instance, if I were asked to play an A minor 9, I could use the structure, but I'd have to make sure the structure was like started a minor third above this, basically the root of the chord, right? If I wanted to use this structure over a C major 7 over G chord, I'd have to make sure that I'm basically threw this structure in at basically a fourth above the bass note, okay? Above the assumed bass note or root note, okay? So I know this opened up a whole can of worms when Shane asked about inversions of chords because there's this whole idea of rootless voicings. And that's basically the idea that this isn't just something that is in a vacuum. This is an idea in a vacuum. This is actually like a real thing that I use all the time. So for instance, this voicing right here that's all fourths, if I have a C in the bass, it sounds happy. It sounds major. If I have an A in the bass, it sounds sussy. It sounds sad. It sounds sussy if I put an E in the bass. I guess if the interval below this voicing is a unison, it sounds sussy. If the interval below, if the implied root is a major third below this voicing, it'll sound major. And you could analyze it and confirm that it's major just by making it into a snowman.
So, Professor,
Yeah.
For Nicole, for these fourth structures, it looks like there's no actual seventh being played, right? Or
Well,
seventh interval from the tonic if it's in the if it's C, because here it just goes E, A, D, G, C again. So there's no B.
there isn't. So I think I actually didn't analyze this correctly. So I think it should be this. Yes, good catch. I feel like I'm missing one. Or maybe that's it. Am I missing anything here in my incomplete snowman? A, D.
I guess maybe if it starts on the B on the bottom, below the E.
Yeah, no, that's a good observation. It's leaving out this. It's leaving out the seventh in this particular voicing. If you're assuming that the assumed root is C. But for some reason, so here's why that works, I guess. The underlying triad is a major triad. The default extension, the default way to extend a major triad in jazz is by making it a major seventh chord. So even though this is not, so like think about it this way: what are the seventh chords that could be made from a major triad? Let's think about it. So I could do this. Well, no, that's not true. I'm sorry, that's not true at all. Let's just think about the default ways that it can be extended. Right? There's this. There's this. Okay. There's this. So here's actually a big reason why this is major and not dominant. So I guess you could extend this major triad with a seventh by putting a major seventh in, and this would become C major 7. You could extend this major triad by putting a minor seventh in as the outer interval, and you get a C dominant 7. Now the thing about dominant voicings is they almost always include both the third and seventh chord degree in the chord. It's like that tritone right here. In jazz voicings, they most often, if you want to really represent a dominant voicing, you want to include the tritone, the third and the seventh, flat seventh. This doesn't have that, right? It has this. I mean, you could substitute it potentially for a dominant voicing, but it wouldn't sound as compelling because it's leaving out this flat 7. So I guess the point I'm trying to make is a little bit verbose. If you see an underlying major triad chord, it can be extended via seventh chords in one of two ways. It could be a major seventh chord, it could be a dominant seventh chord. However, if you don't explicitly see that flat 7 in the chord, then chances are you're dealing with a major voicing. Boy, I've opened up a whole can of worms, haven't I? Sorry, this is what happens when we have an extra day of class. But yeah, this is why the expectation to learn about these voicings in a week is sort of ridiculous, because there's so many ways you can explore these voicings, and it's all context dependent. If you really are interested in learning more about this, I would highly recommend you take Kamau Kenyatta's jazz theory, year-long jazz theory class next year. This guy won 2 Grammys as a producer for like best jazz album. Great, amazing guy. You'll learn a ton. You'll learn about all the different applications for all of these, all the different applications that you can apply these chords in. To some extent, it's impossible to know every single application, but I gave you a little taste of that, and perhaps I'll give you more of a taste in your homework. But to some degree, I want you to know this exists because this is real music, and this is something that you can totally use in your music to get those juicy chords that you want to put in your tracks. But at the same token, it's a little bit beyond the scope of this class to really get super deep into it. But it's a hobby. It's not just a hobby; it's a passion of mine. So I'll continue compiling information on this now that we've opened up the can of worms. And I guess what we're going to do next class is we're going to talk about secondary diminished chords. But who knows? Maybe we'll talk a little bit more about this stuff as well, and just different implications. Also, yeah, I think we can figure out some things to talk about that'll keep things interesting. And hopefully the rhythm stuff was fun for you to talk about today as well. And let's see, let me see. Okay, you know what? One sec. Give me 1 sec while we're still. Hey. Let's see. So I'm going to call in a random student. No, I'm not. There's some student. Okay, never mind. I shouldn't say this in front of everyone, but anyway. Let's just end class with this one tiny thing. He tore out a reed, the great god Pan, from the deep, cool bed of the river, and hacked and hewed as a great god can with his hard, bleak steel at the patient reed, till there was not a sign of the leaf indeed to prove it fresh from the river. Insightful, right? Very, very insightful. I have no idea what that meant, but sounds cool. All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed class, and we'll talk again Thursday. If you want to hang around, I'll be around, and I guess I'll just pause the recording right now.